Hello, today is Wednesday, May 15th, 2019. This is the standard kubeadm office hours, a subproject of SIG cluster lifecycle. Just as a reminder, we follow the Kubernetes/CNCF code of conduct policy here. So, which basically boils down to don't be a jerk. So, if folks can make sure that they adhere to the policy, that would be super de-duper. So we have let's take a look at the agenda today. We have stuff left over from last time, and I think there's a couple of items that actually cropped up from doing PR reviews that I might want to discuss maybe at the end. So Fabrizio, you have the first issue.
Hi everyone. So first issue is about I open up an issue listing what is missing for promoting HA to beta. I think that there are 2 or 3 things that should be discussed here. One is the user interface. So what if we are removing experimental from the flags? Currently, we have experimental control plane that should become control plane without experimental. The same goes for upload asserts.
I don't think we can do that until we have the test automation in place, though.
Which is the last point of the issue. Of course, those will be the last PR of the series. But the interesting question is if we are going to set the upload asserts things on by default.
I didn't think we were going to. It does time expire, so it wouldn't be dangerous. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I kind of agree, but because it is something that has a security concern, so I don't want to enable it by default, but I wanted to ask the question.
I think because you'd have to opt into it, I'd prefer to not do it by default, because still the standard use case is a single control plane node.
Okay. And the last question about UX for HA regards to the upgrade part for the nodes. Currently, when we do upgrades on the control plane nodes, we have to run 2 commands. One is kubeadm upgrade node experimental control plane, and the other one is kubeadm upgrade node config. Sorry, I forgot to config in the issue. My idea is to have, ideally, I would like to have only one kubeadm upgrade node that takes charge to understand if it is a control plane node or a worker node and do whatever it has to do for doing that upgrade. But of course, we are dealing with GA promises, so. It is clear the problem.
I'm sorry. I personally got slacked too many messages on Zoom. I'm turning off notifications, so if you could repeat that for me, I don't know if other people heard it.
Okay, so currently for doing upgrades, we have on nodes, we have 2 commands. One is kubeadm upgrade node config, which upgrade the kubelet config, and this command should be run on worker nodes and also on control plane nodes, on secondary control plane nodes. And then we have also kubeadm upgrade node experimental control plane that takes charge to upgrade the control plane on a secondary control plane node.
Okay.
I don't think that having 2 commands for upgrading a node is a good UX, and I would like to unify them into a unique command.
I'd agree with that.
So my idea is to have a kubeadm upgrade node that basically detect the type of node and do whatever should be done, and to deprecate the other two.
What's the flags for the upgrade for the control plane node? Does it have an experimental?
It's not a flag, it is a subcommand, which is called experimental.
Okay, then that's fine, so long as it's listed as experimental. If it was not, then we'd be in trouble. We'd have to go through deprecation cycle.
Yes, so, okay, so I'm going to send a PR for this one.
Fabrizio, I'm looking at the upgrade docs for 1.14 that me and you wrote. And for upgrading additional control plane nodes, we don't have the command kubeadm upgrade config. We only have it for worker nodes.
I have to check this.
Yes. So we only have the experimental control plane node command for.
Because if it is the case, probably on those nodes we are not. It is an error.
Basically, a problem in the docs.
A problem in the docs. But I have to check. Let me check, and I will ping you on Slack about this.
Okay.
Okay. So for this point, I'm done, and then we have some tests to implement. The idea, just to inform everyone, is that the idea is to not create a specific set of tests for HA, but to get the current jobs at a secondary control plane node. So we are with a unique set of jobs, we are testing also HA.
So I can say here that I was first skeptical, but Fabrizio was able to convince me, because if you think about our current workflows for HA and single control plane setups, we basically, by enabling HA tests only, we already cover the single control plane scenarios.
Yes, but we need to have some more verification from the end-to-end perspective on like what the behavioral expectations are on the cluster for the deployment. So I think we'll get coverage just by having the default HA deployment plus the standard lifecycle paths. I think that will probably be pretty good coverage. But there's also like introspection we might want to do from a, we muck the config, right? We want to verify that the config's been mucked properly. We don't actually introspect deeply with a lot of our default behavior. We kind of make suppositions that everything's good.
But what do you intend to introspect? For instance, the kubeadm config, the list of nodes in the status.
Yep, that would be one of them.
I already implemented those tests at the beginning of the cycle in the kubeadm end-to-end test. So they are covered now.
Cool. We're good. So long as we run that additional set of tests, I'm good.
Okay. We can move to the next one.
Being honest though, like with regards to changing the flag name, I would almost think we would want to bake for one more cycle after these final changes before removing the experimental on the HA configuration.
But then it will be weird to announce that it is beta. I don't want to rush, but if we are going to announce that it is beta and the flag remains experimental.
Well, the kubeadm is GA, but our config is still beta, so we can trail one version behind in like what is the actual state. So if these fucks are experimental, if they mean alpha, and we graduate HA to beta, I think it's still okay to hold them. Making a comparison with the config, basically.
We can also postpone the decision. This will be a simple PR at the end of the cycle, I hope.
Sounds good to me. I did have a question with regards to upgrade. There are several issues, and I know we talked about it, of people mucking the config and wanting to see that, let's say, for example, on a control plane modification, any asynchronous control plane modification, they want to update the endpoints, and they want that to be reflected in the latest version. Did you add that
Yes.
update? Okay.
Yes, this is the discussion. I think that first of all, as a group, we have to make a decision if we want to use upgrade to change the cluster or not, or if you want to use something else. I think that I already shared with this group. My idea is that, in my opinion, upgrade should take charge only of changing the version. And the reason behind this is that upgrade is a really complex procedure. It touches all the components, and I don't think that it is a good suggestion telling to the user basically redo everything only for changing a flag or for changing, I don't know, a certificate sans. And so I see a risk in changing always everything. Second, I see also that there are also at least two other problems. First of all, as upgrade is written today, there are a lot of knobs, and maybe that etcd is not upgraded, certificates are not recreated in some cases. So it is really complex. You expect that it changes everything, but it is not true, and this is why the people complain. And third is that not always upgrade is enough for changing your cluster, because in some cases, let me make an example. If you want to make a change to a kubelet settings, it is not enough to run upgrade on the control plane node. You have to download the config on all the nodes. And for HA, we have to think about what does mean changing a flag with upgrades. So we're getting in a strange story that is different from all the other stories where we have init and join, or upgrade and upgrade node. So I'm really convinced about this.
I agree with your statements. In fact, I want to use that kind of as a foil to potentially close some of those issues, because we get them logged all the time. I think we do need to have a story, though, that it doesn't necessarily need to be in kubeadm proper. Like, for example, changing the knobs and default configurations. If we had fully fleshed out component config, it would solve some of these scenarios, right? And if a person's going to muck things asynchronously, they're responsible for making sure that the config is a correct representation of what they want, before they do the upgrade, because it's going to pull the config and do whatever it sees, right? It's pretty brute force. And I'm okay with having that as a user story, because you've gone off the beaten path. Because you should originally init with the proper config settings, and if you do something asynchronous, then you're going to have to make sure your config matches and is properly proper reflection of what your cluster actually is when you do the upgrade.
I wanted to ask the question, like, by enabling --config for upgrades, we are enabling mutation of the cluster configuration and things like that. So why did we enable this feature? What is the user story for --config during upgrade?
Honestly, I don't remember. I think that when it was done, it was let me say a quick win for allowing user to change something when doing upgrades. But then upgrade procedure became much more complicated, and basically this path is not tested, is not documented, it did not follow HA. So we can also follow it can be interesting to I don't know, to write a cap and explore this option or some other option.
I really like the idea of punting reconf to something like cluster API because it just shoots things and then they come back up, right? And that would force the scenario. The question is like you have an on cluster thing. So I want to defer that to like, we need to address this story. You've brought up reconf many times too. Right?
But I don't know. I guess that at the KubeCon next week there will be a good set of folks from this from this group. I don't know if Marek will be there.
I can be, yes.
Okay, so maybe that next week it is a good opportunity to discuss this by person, at least to find a way forward.
Sounds good. All right, should we move on?
Yes.
All right, Sir Dual expiration. I saw those PRs go through. I have not reviewed them yet.
Yeah. Okay. It was a stretch for my objective of this cycle. I have to stop at this because time is running, and basically what I achieved that now we have a good renewal procedure for certificates in the PKI folder and in the kubeconfig files, with the exception of the kubelet.conf, which is managed by Kubelet, and we know there are problems there. I also implemented a new command that show the expiration of the certificate, so the user can check if its certificate are going to expire, and this created basically starting from this part. It raised the question: what does mean is going to expire? What is the renewal period? So the period before the expiration when we should consider the certificate is going to expire. And second, following a comment from Duffy, it will be, Duffy strongly suggested that kubeadmin upgrade does not renew the certificate every time, but renew the certificate only when they are in this period. So there are some, basically there is a decision that two decisions that should be taken. The first one is what we think a good renewal period, considering that our certificate have a duration of 1 year. And second, if we want to show information about certificate expiring in the upgrade plan, and to make this linked to the expiration period. Too many things.
So let's start with one. What is an acceptable renewal period or time that we should force the rotation? And we currently set the default to 1 year, and that means that they can go for an entire release cadence of Kubernetes to the point where they would have to upgrade to be in support. And that seems like a reasonable thing. Like you'd have to be, it'd be T minus 3 months then. Like if they were, the last 3 month window is the forced upgrade, is the forced rotation. Is that the kind of what the answer you're looking for?
Yes. Honestly, I was thinking to have something more than 3 months because if I remember well from the kubeadm survey, not all the users are upgrading to have at every measure release. But it is it could be also a way to push for a good practice to upgrade the cluster more frequently.
6 months would just split the difference in half, right? Like this is totally magic number generation. What we're doing right now, we're trying to guess what the community would like.
Alex's suggestion of using 1/3 of the validity of the cert period.
Actually, it's not really my suggestion. It's practice what Let's Encrypt using for certificates. So we issue it for 90 days, and after 60 days, we're allowed to renew a certificate. So just generic practice.
Well, that's approximately 3 months. 3.33333. Well, no, that's 1/4. So 1/3. That'd be longer. That would be 4 months.
4 months.
Or we can bind it to the Kubernetes release cycle, which is every 3 months.
That was my original thought. 4 months seem, I don't care. Longer than 1, less than 6.
Okay. So 3 months plus 1 month of grace period for the lazy admin.
I think what should the plan here be is to use 3 months, bind it to the Kubernetes release cycle, and use this like a gentle forcing function for people to upgrade more frequently.
Well, it already is. It's not a gentle forcing function. It is a forcing function. If they don't upgrade, their certs expire. So people have been bitten by this because they're like, why did it fail? They weren't expecting it.
Yes.
Okay.
But we should maybe call that out in the main documentation, to be honest, because there's been many complaints people have had.
We still have to write the renewal docs.
Yes. I want to sync with Duffy in Barcelona to write this document because
So I have a comment about Duffy's request to renew certificates only if they are about to expire, but this can create a picture where we are starting to renew certificates asynchronously from one another. And if you look at the whole picture, you might end up with certificates that are going to expire, some are not going to expire. And I think what is going to be easier for us like maintainers and also easier to understand for the user is to renew all certificates at a batch. I don't understand his argument to not renew certificates that are not going to expire, because we are doing good in any case by renewing everything.
Yeah, I would tend to agree because it's easier for us to support. I don't know what the logic is behind not doing that.
The objection that Duffy wrote in the comment is that does not make sense to throw away certificate in advance. When you have good certificate, why you have to change it then?
Well, if it's done automatically, you don't care. You don't see it. From a maintainability perspective, it makes it easier to reason about what the support cycle is for a given deployment.
Yeah, it's just going to create noise on the plan screen, oh, this certificate's about to expire, why the other are not expiring, and I just don't see his argument valid.
One thing they would suggest is that the check expiration command should actually output the time periods for the individual items. So I haven't read your PR, Fabricio, but from a UX standpoint, like I as an operator want to know what the tail I have on each certificate is.
If you look at the PR, if you open 778 says free, there is an example of the output. Sorry, it is in the issue, in the linked issues. Sorry. Okay, there it is. So certificate, the expiration date, the residual validity. So this is a simple math done for you. And then this column that takes into account the renewal period.
That looks really nice. Yeah.
I think from a...
Please go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that Lubomir was suggesting to remove the last column.
Well, if we force it to auto rotate on every upgrade, which is the original intent we always planned to, I was kind of surprised that we didn't in some scenarios. So from a maintainability perspective, I don't see why we wouldn't.
What about the external CA support and the fact that there's multiple CAs?
Well, we won't do it then, right? Like we won't even actually maintain the certificates. That's up to you to manage.
At all? Because you can have external CA for one and not the other.
kubeadm manage what is it? It is not external.
Yep. So if it's external, that's up to you to manage your certificates.
So about the last column, I don't think I'm suggesting to remove it completely because it's still nice to have. Like what happens if you manually go and update one of the certificates? It's still possible to do. And what I'm suggesting here is to maybe keep the last column, but have still calculate the threshold and still show even if everything is going to be true at some point, I think the column is still okay to have.
Okay, so we change the caption of the column in recommended upgrade, renewal, but upgrade will always will basically always upgrade no matter of renewal of expiration.
Actually, sorry, this is set for automatic renewal, so we always...
Basically, this column is telling to the administrator that kubeadm upgrade will upgrade the certificate or not.
So what do you mean by residual here?
The day before expiration. It is a math between expiration and today and time.now.
Maybe you should change the last column to... So it's the remaining days for validity of certificates.
Yes.
Yeah, so the last column can be removed, I think. It's okay. But residual might be a bit unclear to people. Like remaining days and things like that are easier to understand.
So
okay.
The last column, from my understanding, is whether or not kubeadm will take an automatic action on the certificate, which might just be like better named. So.
Well, I think if a person does their own cert management, then having that show up is useful. The name set for automatic. I mean, I would you might just remove the set form, just say automatically rotate or something, and then it specifies it, because that way, if a person does some wonky configuration where they have a set of certificates that they manage on their own, which a lot of people do, that it's very explicit what certificates will be rotated by kubeadm.
Okay, but it again it makes sense only if we are doing an upgrade to renew certificate only if they are in the renewal period. If we are doing to renew every time, it does not make sense.
Well, it does make sense if we're not managing them, right? If they use the options for external CA.
Okay.
If
that's an information.
Sorry, I was confused again. So if basically the remaining days for the certificate are within the renewal threshold, so okay, we have to renew this, then it's okay to have the last column say, yes, this certificate is going to be automatically renewed by kubeadm upgrade.
I agree with you, but before we were saying that upgrade should renew every time, no matter of. So I have in mind two scenarios. When one is where upgrades renew certificate only if they are in a renewal period. And in this scenario, the last column makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is that upgrade renew certificates every no matter of the deadline. And in that scenario, the last column does not make sense.
Well, the point I was trying to make is that the last column still makes sense if a person manages some of the certs on their own. So at least they're notified that kubeadm will not take action for these certificates.
Okay.
How are we going to detect if they're managing certs on their own?
The CA option parameters.
Based on the external CA.
Yes.
You could also inspect the certs and see that it's not the kubeadm CA.
Yep. That's probably cleaner.
That would be the way that I would want it to do. Yeah.
That's cleaner, but we have a check for external CA in many points of the code base that works differently. So I prefer. I understand your point, but if we have to change this logic, we have to change everywhere, not only here.
So about the main question here, should we upgrade certificates, renew certificates every time during upgrade? I think we shouldn't do it unless the user specifies a force parameter. Otherwise, I think that we should renew the certificates only if they are within the threshold. This is what I'm proposing finally here.
Well, why?
Yeah, is there any reason why we would be squeamish to change people's certs? These components are all self-contained and only talk to each other. But I guess if you change the etcd cert and you were talking to it with Calico or something, then you would need to know. Which that's a setup I've run before.
So you're talking about not renewing external certificates, like external.
If you have something else that's talking to the Kubernetes etcd, then if you swap out the certs, like the user needs to know that that's happening.
Yeah, of course. I'm just talking about the logic about renewing our certificates that we manage.
Yes, the etcd certs are certificates that we manage. So yeah. if those auto-generated certs are switching out from under the user and the user was using, them, if they had copied them around, right? I mean, that needs to be very transparent.
Well, we are going to print a message that we are renewing certificates. Like the question is, should we do it within the threshold or always do it?
I'm in the always camp. but team always versus team threshold. I don't know. I don't see a reason for team threshold. I don't see a logical reason other than it's churn. But I think it gives it.
The only reason I can think of is, just if anything else is using the certs that we auto-generated, which, the fact that they were auto-generated in the first place means that if you're using them, and you're kind of decoupling yourself from the system. So that's
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean that's the
you're using Kubernetes in a way you shouldn't be using Kubernetes, to be honest. Like you should be using internal service resolution. So we have to make a choice. I think that's what Fabrizio wants us to do. So I'm in the team always versus team time window, team threshold.
Always sounds good to me. If I choose to upgrade now and then I skip a few cycles and you didn't upgrade my certs and now I can't upgrade later on, then that would suck.
Yeah, in that case, we can remove the last column.
Okay.
I thought that the last column would let people that were managing their own certs. It would still have purpose. But I mean, I'm fine with that. I'm still for always.
Well, Tim made a point that we cannot renew the external search. So I guess.
So you would want to show that.
Right.
So let's not conflate the vote.
But maybe we shouldn't call this set for automatic renewal then, but we should call it like this is something in the lines.
Yeah, it's beyond threshold, right? Or
external search. It's an external search.
Yeah, external.
Externally managed.
Mm-hmm.
I like that better.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So team always and externally managed.
Sounds good.
Going once, twice, last chance. We can move on. 3 times. All right. We are now.
Thank you.
We are now. All right. Other things on the agenda. There was Lubomir. You had the CIS report stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, Fabrizio, what is the blocker for the Bootstrap kubelet config?
Honestly, I didn't have time to look into. The problem is that it seems that kubeadm creates this configuration on the master node, and then it seems that this file is managed by kubelet certificate, automatic certificate renewal, but something is not working properly, and the same it also for Node. It is also for Node.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kubelet manages this file.
But it seems that we are pointing the kubelet to a file that is, and then when this file is generated, it is generated in another place.
Yeah, this file should point to a symbolic link in the kubelet, the var lib kubelet directory, where this directory contains the automatically rotating kubelet client serving certificates.
If you can give me some pointer without because honestly I don't have time to search for detail. If you can point me, maybe I can fix it before the release.
So one of the things I wanted to do, and it relates to the next bullet point and this topic, is that for 116, I wanted to do a hard sec audit and get someone from SIG-Auth to join us regularly and force us to go through the long, laborious process of doing an entire security audit for kubeadm. And I believe that there's some funding going on too within this from the CNCF, where we can actually get external people who do them, not just the CIS benchmarks or whatnot, not just SIG-Auth, but the people who wear the real tinfoil hats and like live in a tin shed somewhere out in the wilderness. They come out every now and then. They do a full soup to nuts audit. So I was going to talk with them to see if we could get them for 116. And we might be able to address some of these issues now if people want to step up and start to take a look at them to sort of get their bearings on the space before we do a full hard press.
I can do that.
Okay.
So I spoke with Nadir, and his computer crashed in the middle of the meeting, so we dropped quickly. But from what we basically discussed is that both of us do not agree with the whole CSI report, pretty much. So by bringing someone from SIGGOLD, I think that we are just going to bring another person that does not agree with the CSI benchmark. They are very, like, I have question marks. I need to talk with the person who designed basically created the results of this benchmark, because it's kind of, there are a lot of weird things in there.
Do you have like an actual results? Like we have a really old issue that Lucas originally wrote, but we don't actually have the results pasted in there, and like almost like an umbrella issue to like outline what things we disagree with.
So I asked Nadir to create a public document because he's currently working with a client in VMware, and his documents are private. So I basically spoke with Nadir in terms of like, hey, can you please break out the CSI benchmark so that we can share it with the public? And he promised that he's going to be ready for that for the next meeting of 5th of June, which is like 1 week after the week of KubeCon. Actually, it's 2 weeks.
Okay, that sounds good. That'll probably give Yassine enough time to like dig through the backlog, and I'll help walk through that with you, Yassine.
Okay.
Are there any other group topics? I do have one that Ross, are you in the call? I'll wait for mine till the end. Are there any other group topics? Maybe once, twice.
Well, we have group topics from last time.
We do? What are they?
Should we dig into the hairy stuff?
Oh, the containerd stuff? Which stuff?
You know, the bootstrap tokens, the moving kubeadm to staging.
Oh, that one's no. Bootstrap tokens, I saw the PR were totally blocked on API machinery. I took a look at it. So I can't do anything. Like I don't have power. I could usurp it, but I don't want to do that because API machinery would start to yell at me and maybe take away my superpowers. So I want to make sure that they have buy-in. So we're totally blocked on them until they actually pull the trigger. Then there's the second PR, which needs to follow on after that PR gets merged, which is basically ripping it out of V1 Beta 2.
Yeah, and it's still not, these are not all the PRs that we have to do. There's another PR that we basically have to move the API itself. These PRs are only moving the utilities, and Dixu basically said that he doesn't want to move the API because for some reason, the cluster bootstrap repository should not hold any APIs. So if it doesn't hold any APIs, like the question is, where are we supposed to put the bootstrap token structure config?
Then we'd have to maintain it in V1 Beta 2 until, like it's been in V1 Beta. It's been in our config since Epoch. We would have to maintain it until we actually get an external API. Or component config. It's a component config, really. It's not an API. Right? Like that distinction always seems to be lost. But
yeah, it's kind of weird that the bootstrap token repo then is going to only hold the cluster bootstrap repo is going to hold only utilities without the actual structures to perform a bootstrap. It's kind of very weird.
It's super weird. So I would probably look at the component config folks to try and help us along here, maybe. We don't need to make this change unless we're kind of forced to by API machinery. But this is one of those things where it's like, we really need to start resourcing component config as a SIG more heavily.
Is there a resource that I can look at with the details regarding this API move?
Was it D, right? Or Dixie?
Yeah. Lee, do you know Dixie? You've probably seen him around.
Yeah, his English name is Stuart.
I don't think that's the same person.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's Stuart.
Wait, no, is it Daniel? Whatever. Yeah, Dijou.
So Stuart is the guy who already contributes to component config with Lucas, but Dixuat is a separate contributor from China.
No, yeah, you're totally right. He was part of the mentoring cohort like a year ago.
Yeah, so you can message him on Slack on private, I guess.
Yeah, so he's trying to get the Bootstrap token API moved somewhere.
Yeah. I think we have a link in the agenda with the tracking issue.
So Lucas is fully abreast of this situation. We've been living with it since the beginning when we created our config as a component config. So, I mean, you could talk with Lucas and he'd know, he'd see the PR and he'd know what to do and where to go. The question is, from an API machinery perspective, we need to pull something to make sure that that config or that struct can actually live outside there.
Yeah, let's discuss with Lucas as well when he joins the meeting.
Yeah. So that's one of them. What was the other one you mentioned?
I mean, we can punt the other stuff. It's a complicated discussion with staging repo and.
Oh, that's a no. That's a hard no. Like just no.
At some point, we also have to discuss something that David Eads made a good point that we are doing something wrong in kubeadm, and I think we should discuss it with the group. But it's not today. It's just a complicated subject.
No, I want to know.
Yeah,
so I can think about it.
The TLDR is that we are basically vendoring /pkg to get some internal configurations. Basically, we use the internal configurations to be able to, convert between different between different versions of, say, the external types, and we store the internal configuration inside the config map in the cluster for kubeproxy and for kubelet. But as a separate component, kubeadm is not supposed to vendor include internal types. So this is a hard blocker for us to move to staging. Basically.
Yeah. I would agree with that statement. Like the problem is there are a bunch of blockers to moving to staging where like we'd have to decouple clients and decouple the data model. My hard blocker for moving to to moving to staging is that I really want to rely on a set of APIs for the entire system, and that APIs definitely includes component config. Until API server has a well-defined component config, like every single iteration of the project causes perturbations over time. And we've seen this with the proxy, we've seen this with the kubelet, we've seen it with the API server. Anytime they change or modify flags, including feature gates, without us having a well-defined version apparatus for us to depend upon, we will always need that tight feedback loop to turn. Otherwise, we're in trouble, right? just like consumers of kubeadm, because we give the contract of the config, that gives them some guarantee that we won't break them across releases. We need that contract from KK.
Yeah, I also see another problem because we basically include the internal kubelet configuration in the cluster as a config map. When you join a node that I may be wrong here. When you join a node that does not support the same internal config, is it even possible to join a node with a kubelet version that does not respect the same internal kubelet configuration type?
I don't.
We store multiple versions of the kubelet config.
Oh.
So the node will have to use the version that maps to it.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Are you sure about this?
Yes, but I think we only do it from the time when you were using kubeadm. So if you wanted to use an older kubelet, I'm not sure that that would work.
Yeah, I think we need to verify basically what we are doing with these internal types and like the long-term plan, basically.
Yeah, that's the whole reason why the component configuration is a hard blocker. Like we need a well-defined version apparatus system that we can leverage and not be stuck, right? Like otherwise they're not APIs. It's us like, scribbling little Post-it notes, putting it in my drawer, making sure that for this quarter we actually can pull out that Post-it note and do that thing.
Yeah, I might create an experiment at some point by creating a V1 beta 2 kubelet configuration just for the sake of testing this. I don't have anything else for on this topic.
When is that meeting again, Lubomir? I forgot the date.
It's overlaps with KubeCons next week, so I don't think it's going to happen.
I'll talk with Dims when I'm out there. I know he'll be there. I don't know if David Eads will be there or not.
No idea. So the next meeting I think is going to be on Tuesday, the 4th of June.
Okay. I will make sure I go to that one. I'll put it on my calendar. The only other topic I had, we have 6 minutes left, was the decoupling of init and cluster config. I had that one. I asked Ross if there were any more outstanding chain of dependencies or overrides that could occur, and the endpoints one came up. And the question I had is, does it make sense? Is it even possible to decouple?
I think that as long as we actually default it during init and make sure that it's properly filled in during upgrade, it's going to work. At least that's my perception from looking at the code. But yeah, I have to try it, and I did start experimenting with that today, but probably the PR is going to be a little bit larger.
Okay, I'll wait for the update then. That was the only other thing I noticed on PR reviews. I actually had time to PR review. Magic. Are there any other topics? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Well, thanks everybody. If you're going to KubeCon EU, we will see you. There's a session on Monday. Yes, on Monday, where we have a SIG cluster lifecycle sort of face-to-face meeting for the whole afternoon. I think it'd be great for us to chat and banter about future projects, as well as all the good work that's been done. And if we see you there, it'll be great. If we don't, maybe next time.
Tim, where is the information about this session?
It's on the Contributor Summit. So you should have been getting emails about the Contributor Summit.
I probably need to sign up.
Yeah, I'll poke Castro Yo, or poke Contribex if you're looking for sign up details. All right. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.